everyone. Good evening from my side, but then I guess that is a good afternoon to everybody. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for your kind invite and then having me here. Professor Holman and then I have long years of working together kind of experience. And then you know what? I am not a communication expert at all. I learned a lot from Professor Holman during the course of work at the FAO. So I am very happy that to have this opportunity together with Dr. Holman. Now that do I see this weird transcription on my screen only, or you all see this? Maybe it's just on
we all see it, Masami.
You see it, okay, perfect.
Yeah, but
it's good that then you.
It's not a problem.
I don't know how to disable it, so I think that I'm gonna go ahead with this. Look, that I was just listening to Professor Holman's presentation with a great interest, because this is one of the webinar that is specifically targeted to the American consumers, which is quite rare for FAO like ours. We always look at the global situations, but then imagine that in a global situation, we have different culture, different social background, different educational background, and everything is different. And then communication is the hardest thing. And then I think that the Professor Holman has been advising us about something that is common, something that we can use as a tool to tailor the communication about food safety. But then just thinking about American consumers, I think that all of you can agree with me that you guys have a huge, wide variety of people living in the country. So I think that in the end that we're kind of talking about the same thing, that we will have a different kind of audience and then different kind of communication that we have to try. So I think it was a great fruitful thought that just listening to the previous presentation. Thank you, Bill. And then my presentation title is the same, food safety communication, but then I'm putting the subtitle using the Codex guiding principles at the global level. Before going into the communication topic, I have to give you what FAO is. So FAO is a food and agriculture organization of the United Nations, and we are a specialized agency about food security. And then food security is easy 2 words in English, but then we have this definition. To be very honest, we have like 7 different definitions established in last 20 years. But then, you know what I like is that the very initial one that was established in 1996, because it was quite simple. And then I would just read it out loud. Food security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. So you can see the 3 pillars in this definition. And then it's super important for me to, as a person who is working in food safety, and I explain why. And then the reason why that we have different definitions are because we are now having SDGs, and then we have to think about sustainabilities and environmental impacts and all kinds of different values, and then also the trade-offs we have to think about. So that's why that we have a newer definitions that is more inclusive. So if you're curious, you can take a look at the FAO website to understand the latest good definition about food security. But this is the drought situation, and then we have quite few countries experiencing this extreme weather these days. And then this is creating the food insecurity situation. And then from your point of view, in this situation, talking about food safety and nutrition would feel ridiculous because there's nothing to eat. And then why we have to talk about food safety and nutrition? But then FAO's definition is telling that it is inclusive, right? But then why we talk about those 2 almost luxury looking like topics into food security? Because I tell you this photo, I mean, this is the photo that was taken in Haiti, and then the lady is making something. And then I always ask people, like, what do you think that this lady is making? And then the answer is well, before going to the answer, that I initially thought that she was making some sort of plant pot, the dish, and then something that for the decoration or something like that. But then actually the answer is mud cookies. I think that some of you probably know about this. There's nothing to eat, so somebody has to give children to stuff their stomach so that they don't feel this hunger pain, and then it is absolutely horrible situations. So I'm telling you that with this example, that mud cookies are not baked, so it's just it's called cookies, but then it's just outside and then dried. So you can imagine that it's probably not safe, and then it's not at all nutritious. And then, but then people just eat it because these are the things that are in front of them, and then people just stuff it so that you don't have the pain. But then this is not food security, and this is not food. So basically, that if it is not safe, it is not food. So food security has to secure food, which is supposed to be safe. So this is the idea of FAO. So thank you very much to bear with me about this FAO, the information. But then food safety and food security have an interactive relationship. So I think that I just give you this slide to show that if nothing to eat, people would eat whatever that is available, even if that is not safe. And then if food safety situation happens and then lots of food has to be wasted, it may create the food insecurity situation. So this is the impacting each other. So this is something that is very important for FAO to remember. Now that about the main topic. So my question here that if you could use the chat box to think about, that would be great. But then I see that you guys are a bit quiet. It is interesting that the American webinar that I participate, nobody would put video on, so I cannot see the audience. This is rare, I tell you, that many other countries put the video on, so I can see the reaction. Oh, thank you, Londa. I can see you now, so great. So I think that this is an interesting situation. Thank you, Bill. So I would like to know that if you have some ideas that the clear difference between risk communication and communication. What do you think? What makes risk communication stands out from the regular communication? Is it about communicating about risk? Or what about hazard? If we talk about hazard, does it make risk communication? Is it any difference? So I will give this answer later after checking with the Professor Holman so that we are sure that the answer is correct. But then I just want to give you this question first and start thinking about it. And then Codex, the international food standard setting body of the FAO and WHO, has defined what's hazard and what's risk. And then also even communication is defined. So food safety hazard is agent, like biological, chemical, physical, so substance, right? And then food safety risk is a probability, right? So I think that everybody knows about this. I'm sure that this audience here knows everything about this, but then how many consumers know the difference between them? I think that when I try to talk to the consumers, almost none. I mean, risk sounds like a hazard. And then when people say hazard, it sounds like risk. So basically that it's very common that people mix up and then use the same meaning. So I think that we shouldn't be too much thinking that the people would understand exactly what we say. So I think that this is something that we have to remember. And then communication is a process to exchange the information. So if we say risk communication, it can include hazard communication. Codex has this risk communication definition. Can you see? I have put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of the definition. It is basically very too long, I would say. But then this is the definition that all the countries of the Codex, around 180 countries, agree that they can live with. But then this is a compromise that we really had to argue and then discuss about what we mean by saying risk communication. But then there's a definition. So interactive exchange, when we talk about risk analysis, so food safety issues, and then we involve everybody. And then when we talk about explaining about risk assessment findings, and then the process, and then eventually the decision that the government makes. So this is risk communication. Now, are you changing your opinion about risk communication versus communication? Now, if you can use the chat box to tell me, it's like either writing A or B, right? So you asked to prepare the talking points, let's say, as an extension specialist, and then you have to explain about food safety aspects of cell-based food, let's say. There are 2 companies already approved in the United States, I understand. And then the public is asking you a very vague question, like, is it safe? Is cell-based food safe? And then basically, there is not much of the exposure assessment done because consumers are not eating it frequently enough. So there are certain uncertainties, but then you do need to explain that what it is, what is the food safety situation is. So this kind of communication, do you think it is a risk communication or just communication? What do you think?
Can you put the definition back up again? Sorry.
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Thanks.
Interesting. Lots of people think it is it's a communication, isn't it? I mean, if we really look at the Codex definition, this communication about cell-based food and food safety issue will be out of this definition. You see that? But then I would love to have Professor Holman's opinion about it. Then what is this that the extension specialist has to talk about if it is not risk communication?
For me, it is risk communication because people are asking whether there's a hazard there or not, whether there's a risk there or not. So implicit in their question has to be answers related to risk. Sometimes the answer is, the full information is not yet in.
So what's wrong, right? I think that this definition that the Codex set up is only considering the situation of the regulatory framework where risk analysis is happening. So for people like us, that the extension specialists and talking to the consumers, it is, I mean, this kind of communication is risk communication. So if Professor Holman talks about, okay, this is tips and then some guides that how you can conduct risk communication, this would include this kind of communication. So hopefully that is clear to everybody. Good that I was able to make the point. Now that the challenge is, I think that everybody already made, Professor Holman already made a comment about this, but then what I want to highlight once again is that food that as a topic is personal. I am from Japan, so eating sushi is very important thing for me. And then if somebody says like eating sushi is not safe, which is true probably, but then I will not give up. So this becomes very personal. Grandmother cooking, or something that I used to eat when I was little. I mean, those kind of things count. So food safety is not easy communication. So this is big challenge. Second, the bill already said, perceptions matter, and then that perceptions vary. So we cannot have one communication that fits everybody. So, and then perceptions probably are more important than reality. So this is the problem in the food safety communication. And then worst is like 100% food safety does not exist. I mean, we have to take this reality that the food can become unsafe at any point of the food supply chain. How can we explain this kind of thing? And then consumers do expect food that they buy at the supermarket or farmers market is 100% safe. So there is expectation differences, but then term risk. We call it risk communication. The term risk is scary. I mean, it is already having a negative connotation, to me at least. I mean, if somebody says risk, then I start thinking about bad things. So risk communication sounds very negative. And then also sometimes we say that we should put a short and simple message so that it can be easily conveyed to the consumers. But then really, I mean, some people do ask for the transparency, and then they want to know all the evidence, all the data. So how do we balance them? It's a huge challenge. And then also there are lots of people who are attracted to this very vague terms like wholesomeness or organic or natural, or like this very nice Mother Earth kind of nice sound, compared with the term risk. I mean, it's much better sound. So I think that we have to have some understanding of impact of certain words carry. And then we are living in the digital media era, which is not a problem itself, but then I have to be very careful all the time. There is a loud minority exists. So if they start talking so loudly on the social media, it's sometimes very difficult to control the situations. And then the credibility is important. And then whether or not we give the core, like a very hard science-based information versus we listen to the consumers. I understand your concerns. You are worried about this situation. This is what I know. This is empathy aligned messages, right? So we do have to balance them too. And then again, that I am saying about the transparency is important, but then what is the appropriate level of transparency with the communication? It is very important to consider. So I have this, what risk communication should be. It should promote awareness, consistency, a sound basis, and it should be effective. Easy saying, right? And then also strengthen the work and then foster the public understanding, everything that we want to aim. But then risk communication involves a two-way process. So we try very hard to put something into the communication, but then if we don't listen to people that we want to reach, we will fail. And then what I understand using the methods that Dr. Holman is trying to educate me, that timely information is key for the global organization like us. If we are late, that people won't have credibility in us. And then it is also important to have an internal communication as an organization or extension specialist, or like academia or a group of the people to have the same understanding level. So this is something I learned a lot. And then risk communication is not just about communication. So it is not one person's, one specialist role. So we do have to learn each other to share the understanding so that it will become effective. And then we do have a guiding principle on the Codex documents. I will give you this slide so you can take notes of it. It is basically coming out of the documents that Dr. Holman helped us to put together. I will show you the link later. But then the document does have this kind of strategy that perceived risks, example, what kind of communication strategy are necessary for the food safety related communication. So I think that is something to think about, because I put it up as a recommendation from another communication specialist as a table, but then it may work in the American situation, but it may not work for certain cultural situations. So you do have to think through within the extension specialist group to understand what kind of education is necessary and then communication is necessary. And then I just put together that, those kind of fake news that already Bill talked about it, but then how do we handle those fake news? And then how this scandalous media writing, how should educator be reacting to it? And then how about chemicals. People fear about chemicals, but then in the end, everything in the world can be explained in chemical structure. So everything is chemical. So what are they afraid of, right? So I think that all things, something that they have in common is perception, basically, that the something that people just feel from the communication message. So what kind of counter message that the educator needs to put together is, I believe that we have to consider this feeling of the this perceived risk, that we do have to be careful about this, and then not giving the scientific information over and over and over. That doesn't work. So this is a document that I was talking about. Thank you, Bill, for contributing to this booklet. Lots of global experts worked on it, and then a few case studies. So you're welcome to download this document. You search with this title. And thank you very much for listening. And then I'll be very happy to have any questions you may have. Thank you.